Vayan was a university student and had a boyfriend, Kim Taehyung. One day they got into an argument over something, so Vayan fought with him and went home. At Vayan's living room, Vayan was sitting sadly in her living room when her phone rang without checking the number. She answered the call. On the call, Taehyung. Hello, Vayan. Vayan, how dare you call me again? Taehyung. Vayan, my love. Before Taehyung could say anything, Vayan in anger spoke. Vayan, if you call me again, I'll call the police and tell them that you are harassing me. Taehyung. But Vayan, the call ended. Vayan angrily hung up and blocked him everywhere. On the other side, Taehyung. Vayan, you blocked me. I'll fix your mind next time. Think 1,000 times before blocking me. On the other side, a little while later, the phone rings again. Vayan picks it up and sees it's a call from her best friend Minji. Minji. Hello, Vayan. Vayan. Yes, Minji. Minji. Hey, what happened? Vayan. Nothing, Minji. Minji. Come on, girl. Tell me what happened. Vayan. I had a fight with Taehyung. Minji. But why, Vayan? Vayan. You know Taehyung's friend Roma? Minji. Yeah, she's a dash. She's not even really Taehyung's friend. She just pretends to be. And you know, she has a crush on him. Vayan. Yeah, I know. Minji. So tell me, what did that lizard do? Vayan. Yesterday she called Taehyung and said she was in danger. You know what? Taehyung even went to her house. Minji. Oh, then how did you find out he went there? Vayan. Roma's friend told me Taehyung went to Roma's house. So I went there too. You know what I saw? Minji. What? Vayan. She was proposing to him, my boyfriend. Minji. What? Vayan. Yeah, she was proposing and even kissed Taehyung. Minji. She kissed him? Vayan. Yes, she kissed him. Minji. That lizard will die. So what did you do? Vayan. I slapped her. Can you believe she was proposing to my boyfriend while knowing we are in relationship and still kissed him? Minji. Yeah, but why did you fight with the young? You were not at fault, right? Why? Because he went to her house. Minji. Why? She said she was in danger, so he just went to help her. Why? Okay, but he should have told me before going, right? Minji. Whatever happened, it was not Taehyung's fault. Did you block him? Why? Minji. See, it's not his fault. And you know Taehyung loves you very much. Why? Yeah, I know. Minji. Don't you miss him? Why? Yes, I do. Minji. Then unblock him and talk to him. Vayan, not now. I'll unblock him in the morning. Minji, okay, then bye and Take care. Bye. Bye. Call ended. Bye. Taehyung, I love you so much. I can't live without you. I miss you a lot right now, but I won't unblock you so soon. Vine wiped her tears, went to the kitchen, made herself some food, ate, and went back to her room to freshen up and rest. Next morning, it was 11 a.m. and Vian was still sleeping because it was Sunday. Sunlight hit her eyes and she stirred in her sleep, turning to the other side and sleeping again. After a while, she woke up and sat up, still keeping her eyes closed. Standing in front of her was a person black in all black with a mask, looking at her coldly. Vian stretched and opened her eyes, and seeing the person, she got scared and covered herself with a blanket because she was only in her nightdress. Vian quickly got up, put on her gown, and said, Vian, who are you, and how did you get into my house? Vian, tell me, who are you, and why are you here? Please leave. Boy, no, no, no. I came here to punish you, and I won't leave without giving the punishment. Vian recognized the voice and immediately ran towards Taehyung and started slapping his shoulder. It was not anyone else, it was Taehyung. Vian, you scared me, Taehyung. Taehyung, Vian, listen to me. But Vian did not listen and kept slapping his shoulder. Taehyung, Vian, my love, it hurts. Vian stopped, grabbed his collar angrily, and asked, Vian, why are you here now? Taehyung pulled her closer by her waist and asked, Taehyung, why did you block me? Vian, why did you go to her house? Taehyung, Vian, I only went to help her. She said she was in danger. Vian, why did not you tell me before going? Taehyung, I thought I had tell you later. Maybe Vian, she proposed to you? Taehyung, yeah, but I did not do anything, baby. It's not my fault. Vian, she even kissed you. Taehyung, I did not, my love, so it's not my fault. Taehyung kissed her lightly on the lips. Vian, yes, but you could have pulled her away yourself. Why did not you? Taehyung, baby, you slapped her immediately. When you entered, I was just about to stop her. Vian, are you feeling bad because I slapped her? Taehyung, baby, don't you trust your Taehyung? Vian looked into his eyes and saw nothing but love for her. Vian, no baby, I trust you even more than myself, but I don't trust that lizard. I'm scared she might separate you from me. Tears filled Vian's eyes. Taehyung, yes, you should fear all lizards because your boyfriend is this handsome and hot, and it's not my fault. Vian, don't talk nonsense. Taehyung, how did you get in here? Taehyung, did you forget, baby, you gave me the extra key to your house? Vian, oh, right, so why are you here? Taehyung, I told you, baby, I came to punish you. Vian, why? What did I do? Taehyung, what did you do? You blocked me. Vian, okay, I'll unblock you. Now go home. Taehyung looked at her from head to toe. She was very close in her nightdress, and one shoulder strap had slipped Wine panicked and moved away, but Taehyung held her close again. Taehyung, do you think I'll just leave after seeing you like this? Wine, what do you mean? Taehyung, you would not understand, my love. He smirked. Wine, Taehyung, go back home. Taehyung, no baby. Wine, okay, then stay here. I'll come in a moment. Wine tried to leave to change, but Taehyung held her arm and pulled her close again. Taehyung, where are you going, baby? Wine, let me change first, then we'll talk. Taehyung, no, baby, no need to change. We can talk here, and later I'll help you change. Wine, Taehyung, shh. Taehyung rubbed his nose on her neck and said, Taehyung, now it's my time, baby. Today you will get punished for blocking me. While Taehyung kissed her lips intensely, pulled her gown down slightly, and she was trapped in his arms in just her nightdress. A little later, he lifted her in his arms, laid her on the bed, and lay close to her, removing his shirts and pressing himself to her. Only the sounds of their heavy breathing and wine sobs filled the room. The end.